Okay, Councillor Perrotton Williams, we're live now.
Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the corporate accounting panel for the 14th of January. Just past 10 a.m. I'm currently doing it for Bradford. Do we have any apologies?
We have one notice that Councillor Trollope-Bellew.
I'm assuming the silence means no.
I'm here, actually.
So I will swiftly move on to item number 2, which is the declaration of members' interests. Does anyone have any declarations of interest?
Yes, I've got one. Just to, it's the standard one I do. My son is currently in receipt of services from the Bernardo's Leaving Care Service, my adopted son. But it's been the last time I have to declare it because he's 25 next month before the next meeting. So this will be the last time I declare it. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Chairman, can I just read out a roll call of those present, please?
Oh, yes, sorry. I completely forgot about that because we've been chatting.
Okay, thank you. It's just for the live feed. So, Councillor Brailsford, Councillor Perrotton Williams, you just say yes. Can I call your name? Councillor Perrotton Williams is here. Councillor Fuchs?
Yes.
Councillor Hayes?
Yep.
Present.
Councillor Mrs. Kelly?
Yes.
Councillor Trollope-Bellew?
Present.
Councillor Whittington?
Yes, present.
And we also have the following members non-voting: Anne Wright, foster carer.
Yes.
Holly Coombs.
Yes.
Amy Lavery. Elizabeth Bunny.
Present.
Amy Louise Butler. Okay, thank you, Vice Chairman.
Thank you very much. I've turned my video off in case that helps my internet signal. But from what I can tell is that we're going to now be on number 3, which is the minutes of the previous meeting held on the 28th of November. I'm not sure whether you want to wait for Councillor Brailsford or whether you would like me to sort those out at all.
I think we're quorate, so if you'd like me to do a roll call and people say yes or no whether they agree to the minutes, that's fine.
Okie dokie, that's absolutely fine with me. I suppose we need to, is everyone happy with that? Do we need a proposer and a seconder for the minutes?
Yeah, if you're happy
I'm assuming
with that.
everyone's read them.
If you're happy with that, we'll just get a proposer and a seconder.
Yeah, I'll propose them. That's Councillor Fowkes.
Thank you. Seconder?
Andrew Hayes.
Okay then. So, yes or no if the minutes are a correct record. Councillor Brailsford, not in attendance just yet. Councillor Perrotton Williams.
They are a correct record.
Thank you. Councillor Fuchs.
Yes.
Councillor Hayes.
Yeah.
Councillor Mrs. Kelly.
I didn't attend the last meeting, so.
Okay. Thank you. I'll make a note. Councillor Mr. Trollope-Bellew.
Abstain.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Whittington.
Sorry, I have to abstain because I had to leave the meeting because I was feeling unwell.
Okay, we've got enough members who've approved the minutes. Thanks, Vice Chairman.
Thank you very much. So the next item on the agenda is agenda item 4, which is the announcements by the Chairman, Executive Councillor and Lead Officers. I would quite like to, if possible, go back to this when Councillor Brailsford comes online, in case he has anything that he wants to say. He hasn't told me anything, but he may do. Do we have any announcements from the executive councillors or lead officers?
I've not been notified of any, Chair.
Good morning, everyone.
Okay, is that David?
It is. Obviously, I've got the microphone working. Yeah, good morning. Many apologies for the last 15 minutes. Just to say that we found out through the IT specialist that my Teams had been deleted from my laptop. So thankfully, I'm now here. And I don't know, can anyone see me?
No, Chairman.
Yeah, unfortunately, I can, David. Yeah.
Oh, you can, Richard. Okay. Okay. Well, it's probably a good thing actually that no one can. Just giving me time for my blood pressure to lower slightly. But thanks for starting the meeting anyway, Cleo. And I think I gathered that you was on the announcements by the chairman, executive, councillor, and lead officer. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Indeed.
Okay. I've nothing particular to say on that, although the lead officer may do. There was an incident towards the back end of last week, which may well mean that we have a serious case review coming up shortly. But I don't want to say anything about that because it's a very serious matter. And at this moment in time, I believe the police are involved. I would also like to go back, if that's allowable, please, on the minutes of the meeting. There was an item in there that I'd spoken to the Director of Children's Services about, and I just wanted to make a statement on that for future reference. So with your permission, Cleo, would you allow me just to go back to item 3 of the agenda, please?
Of course.
Okay. All right. Well, sorry, I was waiting for that. In the minutes, which I presume you have approved, and that is right that you've done so because it was an accurate record as I was aware. But there's reference in there to the accommodation in Grantham that our young people have in the Leaving Care Service. And many years ago, when we took that building on, it was the former firehouses, and it was referred to at that time as the firehouses. Now, it's actually on Denton Avenue in Grantham. Many of you know I've been there. And I would like to think if I lived there, it would be referred to as Denton Avenue, not the firehouses. I think that is something that I allowed to be said at the meeting last time, which I should not have done. So, yes, I will sign those minutes as they are, but I would like it known that we refer to those homes of those young people as Denton Avenue, not as the firehouses. And I hope members, you do agree with that. Okay. No one seems to be dissenting. So can I just, for clarification, on my screen when I came in, it did say that Councillor Fuchs was chairing the meeting. Can you confirm that it's who was chairing it before I arrived, please?
Councillor Perrotton Williams was chairing it up until after we'd signed off the minutes. Okay, Nick, thank you very much for that. So we'll go back to item 4 now. And does any of the lead officers want to make any comment on that potential serious case review that may crop up in the near future?
Kate, would you like me to say something?
Yes, Janice, if you think it's appropriate. Yes, please.
Yeah. Just
a reminder, Chairman, we're in open session. If any information is confidential, then just need to be careful.
Yeah. So
Thank you.
Yeah, so just briefly to say that there was a very tragic incident on Friday last week. As David rightly points out, that I will be making a notification to the national panel, and that will trigger a rapid review. Once that review's concluded, we can bring that, once it's published, to corporate parenting panel for members to be aware of what the incident was, what the actions we've taken, and what the learning has evolved from that. So suffice to say, you're probably aware, even though the names haven't been released, it has been made public that there was a serious incident involving a young person.
Thank you, Janice. Everything's going off this morning. That was my phone, so apologies for that. Hopefully I've thrown it out of the window now. Not literally, of course. Thank you. Right. Well, if that concludes item 4 of the agenda, I hope it does, we can move on to the main part of the agenda. So if you just bear with me a moment, I'm still trying to collect my thoughts, actually. There is a change to the agenda. I think you've all been circulated on that. I was alerted last week that there'd been some changes to the initial health assessment, and it was requested that Susan from LCHS and Jenny from NHS Lincolnshire CCG would attend this morning to give us the developments that's been put in place to mitigate the changes to the initial health assessments. Now, apologies because I wasn't here first thing. I presume that either or Jenny or Susan are here, and they're going to present this item, which is be item 5, please.
Yes.
Chairman, Susan has given her apologies, and it looks like Gemma Cross is representing her.
Okay, right. Well, I'll hand over to them then. Thank you for that, Nicholas.
Thank you, Councillor Brailsford. My name's Jenny Harper. We have met before. I'm the designate nurse for safeguarding adults, children and looked after children for Lincolnshire CCG. And as my colleague said, Susan's not able to be here today. Unfortunately, we're responding to obviously the pandemic for the NHS. So Susan's been having to pick up some work around that. So we've got Gemma here today who is representing Susan, and she's going to give a bit of an overview as far as I'm aware around the situation, and then I can give some supporting information on behalf of the CCG. And also we have Elizabeth Bunny, who is one of your members, regular members, so she'll be able to talk about some of the operational work as well. So if I hand over to Gemma.
Thanks, Jenny. Morning, everybody. So my understanding is that I'm just going to talk through where we've been and what we're doing and sort of what our mitigation and plan is going forward. So please feel free to stop and ask any questions. But as you're aware, we had lots of issues historically, and there was lots of monitoring regarding our initial health assessments. It was on our risk register for many years. Multiple issues, but particularly around the medical workforce, which LCHS didn't employ themselves. So we were continually reliant on training GPs and keeping GPs engaged with the process, and that has become increasingly more difficult as time has gone on. So for many years, our compliance with the guidance was only really between 7 and 9%, and we did have concerns regarding the quality of the assessments and the outcomes for children and young people. And pre-COVID, we had lots of discussions and meetings. We spoke to the LSCP, our CCG colleagues, NHSE and I, and proposed a pilot for a nurse-led model that was going to include a nurse, advanced nurse practitioner, and that pilot was being supported by all the relevant bodies. Unfortunately, we were then hit by COVID, and so this never got off the ground. And during COVID, our looked after nurse team, led by Liz Bunny, have conducted the IHAs and the RHAs by phone. There's been a full quality assurance process in place for this, and that has been audited by the CCG, and we've conducted feedback assurance processes with carers, staff and the young people themselves, and it's provided some excellent feedback on the quality of the initial health assessments, but also on the outcomes for children, for their health, so particularly around obesity and mental health and access to CAMS. Any children that have required a GP or a medical opinion have been seen by a GP during this period, and appropriate referrals to other services have been made. As you're aware, we've then received some challenge by other partners in the region, so Leicester and Nottingham, around our processes and how we've been working outside of the guidance. And the statement that was issued basically meant that we were advised that we should be seeing children who've been seen by the phone face-to-face by doctors, and that was the recommendation from the statement, which is very difficult because we're now in a pandemic and we also still don't have the workforce, the issues that were pre-COVID. So everybody who has been assessed and had these appointments via our nurses during April to October and who have remained a looked after child in Lincolnshire have had subsequent follow-up by the nurses, or they've had an adoption medical as appropriate, and they have had those follow-up telephone conversations with our nurses to check their health and to check that appropriate actions have been taken. As you're aware, just before Christmas, further discussions were had with the CCG and with NHSEI, and we were not able to support our current working model. And so our current system is that if medicals can't be arranged within the statutory timeframes, that the nurse team are doing a health and wellbeing telephone call so that they're having that contact with a medical person and any immediate issues can be identified and appropriately actioned. We have, since COVID, we've actually gone on to employ our own medical workforce, and this is being strengthened all the time, and we now have a number of doctors who will be going through the training and will be able to start delivering the IHAs end of February into March, and we've continued to have a couple, I think 1 or 2 GPs who have always provided a small number of IHAs, so they've continued to do that. So where we are is that particularly December and January's figures will be particularly low because we had to stop what we were doing and we've put the mitigations in place. But going forward, we do feel that we've got a good plan in place going forward. And I think it's just to say that we will be writing up the work that we've been doing and the evaluation, and we hope that that will contribute to the national review of the guidance. The quality has been really good feedback, the outcomes for children has been really positive, and we're really proud of being able to contribute to that national picture. I don't know if there's anything else that you were particularly wanting from me this morning, but I suppose that's just to bring everybody up to speed and give a quick overview.
Okay, thanks, Gemma. I can see Jenny there nodding away. Is there anything you wanted to add, Jenny, to that before I ask members to come in and ask questions?
Yes, please. It was just reiterate, the process that Gemma describes, and to just say that we've involved local authority have been involved in these discussions, and they will be able to appreciate how difficult it has been to try and facilitate the initial health assessments, definitely. And we had seen a real improvement in quality and compliance, but actually I'm afraid that the CCG was really left with no choice once we'd had the official briefing from the Royal College of Paediatrics and Child Health and the Royal College of Nursing. We had to temporarily sort of stop that nurse-led model, which was very disappointing for everyone concerned. Certainly the CCG have been wholeheartedly supporting the nurse-led model and will continue to do that, but we have to accept that sometimes we are influenced by the powers that be, if you like. We are actively looking at ways to improve, as you've heard from Gemma, and also it is on the LSCP risk register. It is also on the CCG risk register, and we're working hard to try and for the good of the children. This isn't about compliance figures. This is about quality for these children and young people to get their health needs met at an early stage. So really that's all I had to add at this point. Thank you.
Thank you, Jenny. I can see that Janice, I think, wants to come in. And you're right at the very end. You said exactly why this panel actually exists. It exists for the right outcomes for our young people. And that's what is primarily why we are here this morning. So, Janice, did you want to come in before I open it up to members, please?
Yeah, and really only just to express our, disappointment, really, and completely understand why we've had to move to the position that we have had to move. It's not because of anything that the nurses have wanted to do. They've absolutely been passionate about doing this. And as Gemma and Jenny have said, the outcomes for children as a result of them leading on this have improved fantastically and amazingly. So regrettably, it is a position that they're not able to move away from at this point in time. I wholly support everything that they're doing at the moment, and we're working really, really closely to mitigate against this and get a system up and running that will at least meet the needs of children at the right time. And I'm heartened to hear that they are continuing to do their health and wellbeing checks, which is really reassuring for us. But really, and I think writing up the work that's been done and kind of having that published would be really helpful in terms of maybe influencing the bodies that make these decisions, so to speak. So totally support the work that we're doing at the moment. Disappointed, but understand why we've had to reach the position that we have.
Okay, thank you for that, Jenny.
It's not one to try and buy anybody.
Before I I think Councillor Folks wants to come in, but before so, I think, Jenny, you want to come back, please. So, yes, over to you, Jenny.
Thank you, Janice. We absolutely value that support, and we have all been in this together for such a long time. The three local authority, the health, and but it's just to say we are not going to let this lie. Just to reassure you, we are going to do everything in our power to make sure that these children get their initial health assessments within time frames.
Okay, thank you. I will sum up at the end, but I'm going to do it in order. I think Councillor Fuchs, did you want to come in first, and then Cleo?
Yeah, thanks very much, David. Gemma, that was really good. It must be a nightmare working under these conditions that we're in, but it's really encouraging to see that what you said at the end there, Jenny, about it's not about procedures, but about outcomes, and being pragmatic, I think, is the key to all this. And you're doing really well. But the question I have is, what about children who need medications when they come into care, and how is that handled?
Liz, yeah.
Yeah, do you want me to answer? Yeah. When the children come into looked after by the local authority, if necessary, they change their GPs to a local GP to a foster placement, and any medication that they require is through the GP. We do sometimes have a bit of delay if they're medications that are normally prescribed by community paediatrics, because some GP surgeries will do a shared agreement and others don't. But it's one of the things that we do look at very early on to make sure that there isn't any break in medication.
Great, thank you very much. And well done, by the way.
Yeah. Thank you, Rob. Cleo, did you want to come in? Probably not. Right, is that Councillor Whittington?
Hello. Yes. Thanks, Mr. Chairman. I just got a question, which when we adopted our son, we fostered him with a view to adoption for a time period before. One sort of issue we had, and I'm going back 15 years, so the systems might have changed since then. It wasn't a case of if he was on any medication, but we had real problems in trying to establish what of the childhood vaccinations that he had received prior to coming into care. So really, just and obviously that's potentially quite important. I think COVID's brought home to all of us now the importance of vaccinations. So I'm just wondering what safeguards are in place there to just ensure that children coming into care have had all their necessary childhood vaccinations. Thanks.
Shall I answer that?
Can someone, please, if you're not speaking, can you turn your microphone off, please? And I'm going to slap myself on the wrist as well, because we're getting feedback. So, yeah, we can do that, please. Thank you. Now, I think, Liz, is it Liz or Jenny? One of you's coming in to answer that anyway. Thank you. Yes,
it's Liz. I'll answer that. I mean, when children first become looked after, we do look at their immunisation histories. And I think in comparison to 20 or 15 years ago, we now have an electronic record system that's shared by many GP practices all over the country, as well as Lincolnshire. And so we were able to see their vaccination history more readily. And if there are any queries, we do go back to the previous GPs to get that. So it's something that we do work on. But I think it's a lot easier than it was 15 years ago to get the accurate history. In respect of COVID, we are having some delays with immunisations, mainly, sadly, the school immunisations that are delivered through schools because the schools are being closed. They've got a programme, they've got a massive programme, but at the moment they're not able to implement it as they'd wish.
Thank you, Jenny, for that. Does that answer the question, Councillor Whittington?
Yes, thank Mr. Chairman. I kind of assumed that the system had potentially improved over time, and I'm really reassured by that. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, Cleo, before we move on, is there anyone else wishing to speak, please?
I'm not sure if you can hear me, Chairman. My chat function doesn't seem to be working, so I haven't been able to send you any messages to say whether someone else wanted to speak. The only thing I can currently see on my screen is that Elizabeth has got her hand up, so I don't know if that's a legacy hand, but I just got kicked out of the meeting, so I've come back in again, so hopefully I will start getting some messaging soon, so I apologise for that.
Thank you, Claire. I can assure you we're not kicked out of the meeting by any of us, so delighted to have you back anyway. Now, Jenny's got her hand up. Is that, do you want to come in, Jenny, before I sum up?
Please, just,
Yes.
Sorry, Chair, but just to add, I have a network of colleagues across the country for looked after children, children in care as designate. And if there are any complex cases that are being transferred into Lincolnshire, they will contact me, such for medication, for complex medical or mental health issues. So we do have that process as well as the GP records and things like that. So if there is anything, we tend to sort of inform each other prior to them going into the county. So hopefully that's a bit of a safety net as well for any children with complex needs.
Thank you for that, Jenny. And again, I'll just reiterate what Councillor Fuchs said earlier. The stress that the NHS, CCGs and everyone in your profession is under, and the work that you're doing is absolutely brilliant. And, you know, we're very proud of you anyway. Now, when we go back to initial health assessments, I've been on this panel now for many, many years, and I know that the difficulties that we've had moving forward. So that was the reason that we asked you to come in this morning and give us an update, because I was concerned when I heard this, what was happening. So you've certainly reassured me. I think the steps you're putting in under the current circumstances are correct. And all I would ask is hopefully we'll see the figures. And if we don't, we'll ask to see the figures. You can rest assured on that, Jenny. And I'm sure sometime you'll come back and we'll scrutinise it and ask questions again. But we need to move forward. And as I said at the outset, it's not about it, it's about outcomes for the young people. And we're all committed to that. So thank you very much. And I'll now move on to the next item.
Can we leave now?
Of course, I was just going to say that. Yes, you can leave, and hopefully you've got a boot full of AstraZeneca vaccines or whatever you're doing.
Yeah.
Or Pfizer. I wish. Yeah. Okay, and thank you very much. And thanks for coming in at short notice. Thank you very much.
Bye.
Yeah.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Bye. Right. Well, thank you for that, and it was great that they came in at short notice. I think they responded to requests in less than a week, so we'll now move on. So I'm slightly confused. That was item 5 on the agenda. I'm now looking at item 6, so we'll move to that. It's commissioning excellence, and we are to consider a report from Amy Alcock, Commissioning Manager, Commercial, on an update to the action plan of the Looked After Children Placement Sufficiency Strategy, Commissioning Excellence, from meeting the sufficiency duty 2018 to 2022. Now, I've just read that out, and I'm not sure that I understand it myself, so I'm going to hand over to you.
I was going to say, that's quite a snappy title there, isn't it?
It's too long, actually. Yeah.
Do apologise for that.
Good morning. Good morning, Amy. I will hand over to you. Yeah.
Thank you. I'm obviously here to answer questions, and the report is in my name, but I'm going to hand over to my senior officer, Bridie Fletcher, who's going to present it this morning. But obviously, we'll both be here if there's any questions.
Okay, good morning, everybody. It is indeed a snappy title. There are a range of actions identified through the action plan. My role is to pull those together from identified officers and present them to you with an updated action plan. So in terms of how I was thinking that I would present this, I thought I would kind of run through some of the key challenges and actions and kind of elements that have been completed through the year. And then Amy and I would answer any particular questions that you'd had. If you'd like me to run through the report kind of page by page, I'm more than happy to do that. So, Councillor Brailsford, no, no, quite happy. Okay. Running through kind of activities then for 2020 in terms of commissioning and associated activities around placements and social care. It's undeniably been somewhat challenging. We've had a range of activities, COVID notwithstanding. We've had placement numbers go up, we've had increased complexity of young people. Highlighted elsewhere in the report is impact on supported lodgings and foster carer numbers. We've had COVID cases with staff and with young people, although I have to say not particularly high numbers at all, which has been rather pleasing to hear. Throughout almost all of our accommodation strands, a lot of providers have been untouched by COVID, which is wonderful, but nevertheless it has hit some of them. And I think it's been a challenge implementing from the beginning around virtual visits. However, the key points through the action plan, there's been a huge amount of really good practice through this year. The action plan highlights a range of activities from officers and across different but related service areas and social care about things that have happened. So in terms of placements, we've had, yes, there's been a number of young people coming through requiring accommodation, but every young person that's presented through to our commissioning team, through placements, through social care, supported by leaving care, Futures for Me, we've sourced them safe and suitable accommodation. So we feel really quite proud of that. And I think that's a joint effort that commissioning have been really involved with, both the corporate parenting manager around supported lodgings and our youth housing model. Our commissioning team have kind of done lots and lots of work keeping in touch with our placement providers to make sure they have everything they need and to offer support. And that's also been one of the huge positives of COVID, strangely, that relationships have really increased and have been strengthened, which has been hugely to the advantage of placement stability. We've done a lot of work to try to keep young people in placement. and I think that's been very successful. The work that the wider social care team kind of getting together and talking about move through and where we can move young people through from INSA and residential care into supported lodgings has been hugely valuable. There's been a lot of virtual delivery of both visits and kind of training that's highlighted through things like the Care to Learn work that's been supporting for foster carers. Hugely valuable things like the emotional health and wellbeing service that have also moved virtual. Contract management meetings have done the same. So I think the workforce as a whole has kind of stepped up and delivered things in a different way through 2020. And that's not, I think that's actually created a lot of opportunities. There's been a lot of young people that have very much welcomed a different way of working. Nevertheless, kind of it's something that we need to look forward. So I think there are things in there around B4C and the big conversation where some of those things have happened virtually. And I think young people are saying across the board, so things like leaving care visits, social care visits happening virtually. Young people have said, actually, it seems that they quite like it. It's not necessary that they want to go back to face-to-face visits, but I think it's now a jigsaw going forward and about how we deliver that service and support them properly. So there have been also 2 key services that have gone live during 2020. I'm counting youth housing in that because it feels like they went live in 2020, although they went live actually on the 1st of January. So you might have to kind of bear with me on that one. The new Leaving Care service went live on the 1st of April, which was an interesting time to go live, I guess, about a week after the first lockdown started. Leaving Care have supported both social care and commissioning hugely through this. We've got a good range of services, and I know Lisa is presenting her 6-month report later. High levels of young people in suitable accommodation. EAT and young people in education, employment and training numbers have taken a hit through this year. But again, that's not, that's more than understandable given the situation. A lot of those young people are working in the gig economy, are working in hospitality, and that, as you will all be aware, has taken a hit with successive lockdowns and closures. So EAT figures are below what we would normally expect to see, but fingers crossed that will improve through 2021. The other service that went live this year, although it didn't quite, was the youth housing service. That was due to start on the 1st of July, but due to COVID and complexities around young people's accommodation, implementation, getting the service ready, securing new accommodation, getting that ready, meant that we decided to defer it. So it started on the 1st of January. All young people have moved into their new accommodation. They've been really proactive in the implementation period around recruitment, around training of staff, and pretty much ready to go on the 1st of January. Some young people moved their accommodation, Boston in particular. I think that was deferred just until January to make sure all support staff could be ready, but that went seamlessly and young people were thrilled with their new accommodation in Boston. So that was wonderful. Lots of good proactive work with the corporate parenting manager, with the Future for Me team, with commissioning, certainly during the early stage of COVID, around mapping and managing presentations to youth housing to make sure young people were accommodated safely and quickly and appropriately. And I think we did really well with that. Other key points. Amy, have you got any more?
I think it was mainly. Sorry, apologies. I think it was mainly around the two new services, obviously, that started since last year. So I'm trying to think in terms of the big things that have happened since we came last January. There's 2 new services that have started, and as Bridie said, even through lockdown, managed to get those services up and running. NACRA, who took on the new youth housing contract, that's who we awarded to, have been really, really proactive throughout the whole of last year, trying to get things ready for that new service, and they did really, really well at trying to look after and support those young people during that really difficult time last year, to sort of kind of keep them stable and make sure that they were well supported. So yeah, I suppose out of that adversity last year, we saw some really good practice, and we've got some really strong relationships with our suppliers now, so that's really positive.
Thank you, Amy. Is that the end of the report so far? Are you ready for questions, Amy and Bridie?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. Anyway, I want to come in at some stage. I see Councillor Fuchs has asked to speak, so I'll start with Robert. Over to you, Robert.
Thanks, David. Thanks, Bridie. Really good report. On item 6, the shortage of one-bed accommodation throughout Lincolnshire and what you're doing about it and so forth. Have you ever looked at ex-military bases and accommodation you could get in like RAF bases and army bases that are sort of running down a bit? Because like Scampton, for instance, it's not far from Lincolnshire, and there's probably a good bus service there. I mean, if it's good enough for RAF personnel, it should be good enough for looked after children, people transitioning from care. And the second question is, care leavers out of county, disadvantaged with council tax. And I can see Andy Morris, the corporate parenting manager, did a really good job in getting the districts on board throughout Lincolnshire. But maybe it's most unfair for our looked after children who move out, to have to pay council tax. So maybe we could have suggest a report to the panel at some time in the future as to how Andy's getting on with that. And maybe even the possibility of, the government legislating this. So it's not up to sort of individuals to try and get a fair deal for children, because it's obviously nationwide, this problem. So what do you think about those two things? Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. So the first one around the ex-military bases, I'm not sure whether that's anything that we specifically ever looked at. I suppose it's something that we can take back and we can have a look at. In the new model of the youth housing service that started, their aspiration is to try and provide move-on accommodation for those young people that are in the service. So I think they've always had a number of move-on options, and I think what they're aspiring to do in the new contract is to have as many move-on options as they have beds for our contract, to sort of help to move those young people through into the next stage, and to then hopefully look at tenancies in their own rights. I'm not sure whether there's not sure who's sort of online, if Janice is there, whether the ex-military bases is anything we've ever considered, or whether there are any issues around that. But certainly it's not been considered during the youth housing part of the tender of the contract.
Well, it might come in handy just for short term, like to relieve pressure kind of thing,
Yeah, I think we've tried to build some of that into the youth housing model itself. That kind of short, if we need to support those young people on a short-term basis, to be able to bring them into those units of accommodation. There's lots, rather than sort of like the 3-4 main foyer styles in the old contract, there are quite a few sort of smaller units that are attached to the new contract to kind of allow that sort of short-term work to be undertaken with those young people. One of the main focuses of the new contract as well is about supporting those young people home. So when they come into service, it isn't a case of they come in at 16 and they kind of see all the way through till they're 21 if they're a care leaver. It's much more about trying to support those young people to try and return home where it's safe to do so. So I think that the whole contract's kind of built around looking at the short term and trying to build those relationships back with their families. So I don't know whether you wanted to add anything to that, Janice.
No, I think you described what we do really well. Thank you, Amy and Bridie. And Councillor Fuchs, just to pick up on your point, no, we've never really explored that as an option, and I'm quite happy to take it away and we can have a look at it, because obviously
it might turn out to be
anything that expands our portfolio. Obviously we're very keen to look at. So yes, thank you for that.
And the council tax.
Yes, in terms of the council tax, I don't know whether is Andy got his hand up there. I'm hoping he's going to jump in.
Hello, yeah, good morning everyone. Yeah, the wonder of council tax. Yeah, one of the problems we've got with that, councillor, is that it's reciprocal arrangement. What we would then have to do, as well as other looked after children and care leavers placed within Lincolnshire, I would have to work with our district council, say, actually, do you know what, if we're going to have a reciprocal arrangement, then we should be offering young people who are placed here by other authorities, etc., or live here from other authorities, council tax relief for them as well. I would welcome a national response, a little bit like the Scottish Care Leavers Compact. They just made a decision across the whole of Scotland that council care leavers would be exempt from council tax. Unfortunately, the English government decided they would devolve it to local authorities to make individual choices, and that's the position we're in. Because Kerry's got a hand up as well, so Kerry will probably give a bit of a better national picture on it. But I would advocate absolutely a national approach to it. And what I'm trying to do is, one of the things that we did start before COVID happened was a bit of a regional, staying close relationship with our regional partners around offering exemptions from council tax, etc., and priority on housing lists across many authorities, including Nottingham, Nottinghamshire, Lincoln City, and all those different areas together. But it is something we've still got to work on. But it's going to be a much bigger piece of work than working with our own 7 district councils, unfortunately. But we can work on it.
Before I gather someone else has got their hand up, and I know that Councillor Kelly has. I'm just going to ask you to wait, Councillor Kelly, and I've forgotten who else got the hand up.
It's Councillor Whittington had his ask to speak, then Councillor Kelly, and I think was it Kirsty? Is that right? Has got her hand up? Well, I can't see. It's gone across the bottom of my screen.
Kerry,
sorry.
Thank you. I think if we let Kerry come in, because I'm sure Kerry's going to add something to what Andy said. So can we go Kerry and then Councillor Kelly and then Councillor Whittington, please?
Yeah, it's just to say that at a national level, there is a paper at the moment sitting with government to talk about council tax and actually it being a whole England approach, so that it's a standard that care leavers get a reduction or no council tax at all. It's due to the different council tax levies across the country of why they're finding it difficult to make that decision. Obviously, with other things that are taking priority at the moment, that's stalled. But we are hoping that that will happen. And Barnardo's and other charities have gone in as a combined partnership to levy that to the government. So it is on the agenda.
Yeah. Thank you for that, Kerry. Rob, again, I have to say 2 excellent points you've raised there. I'm now going to go to Councillor Kelly, please.
Hello, thank you. This is the first time on this committee, so I'm listening with interest. I'd like to know, and I don't know whether you have the figures, how many children are waiting for foster care? That might have been contained in the report, maybe I've just missed it. And what I was going to ask as well, obviously, when you say one of your concerns is the age profile of experienced foster carers continues to be a cause for concern. What age are we talking about in terms of, the average age where people do foster care?
Thank you, Councillor Kelly. Janice, do you want to answer that? You seem to have all the facts and figures. Sorry to put you on the spot.
No, that's absolutely fine.
I just wanted an overall.
No, that's fine. And Mr. Harris is here today as well, and I'm sure he will interject when needed. So there is a national shortage of foster carers, around 8,000 children requiring placements. In Lincolnshire, we do really well. We've got a very strong internal in-house foster care market. Obviously, the pandemic has affected that. Some carers are not taking new placements for reasons of their own vulnerabilities. The average age, we did a piece of work on this just this week because we were looking at that. And the average age of the foster care households is 53. So quite young compared to some of us. And I was quite reassured, although John will tell us that 50% are between 50 and 70 years of age. So It's
Yeah, I will tell you that. And the other thing I think is quite significant, when I first sort of started working with foster carers, people did it as a life choice. So did it for 30, 40 years in some occasions. I don't think we see that now. I don't think if we're all sitting here in 20 years' time, that would be the experience. So I think you're getting people coming forward, and we can talk a bit about this under the fostering paper in due course. Still getting people showing an interest, but they're people who come forward either with very limited capacity to offer us something, or they're not looking at it as a life choice, something they're going to do forever and a day. And we're obviously working often in situations where until this year, of course, people were both working. So again, fostering has had to be more flexible in terms of how it works with and to support children as well as those foster carers. So again, as I say, we can come back to it because they're really, really pertinent points. And the fact that we can sit here and tell you 53 is the average age. If you'd asked me that 10 days ago, I wouldn't have known that. Instinctively, I knew it would have been an older age range, but I think we were both pleasantly surprised when we looked at that as the mean sort of age of a carer.
We were.
We were, weren't we?
We were. There's hope for us yet, John.
Did you expect it to be older then?
Yeah, I think I did. Over 50, we know 50% of our carers are between 50 and 70. And I suppose anecdotally, I know those carers who've been around for a long time with all the experience. So I was quite heartened, actually, that they were younger than me, say that anyway. So that's good.
Thank you.
Thank you for that. Now I'm going to go to Councillor Whittington, I think, next, please.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chair. I won't risk turning my camera on because I'm like some members, some people. When I turn it on, it can just throw me out. Really good report. Thanks, Bridie, and thanks, Amy, for it. I think it's always very good to see what I call a reflective report, because you identify those areas that are working well, but also those areas that you've got concerns about. I think it's really important, because I think that shows the depth of knowledge that you've got of what's going on, and the fact that you do know that in certain areas things can be potentially improved, and also that you've got an action plan to get I wouldn't say put things right, but to improve the service, shall I say. I was going to raise the issue about the council tax rebate. I was just going to request sort of an update, but I think Andy and Kerry have more than dealt with that. My remaining point was around, I think it was Bridie who referred to the fact that obviously during the lockdown, in terms of contacts with our young people, obviously we've made a lot more use of digital ways of communicating, and I'm guessing that for young people, they live in a world of digital. They live in a world of social media, and probably may find a more formalised meeting where everybody sits down in the same room to be a little bit, perhaps I won't say frightening, but potentially give them causes for a few concerns. So I'm just wondering, potentially, if there isn't any good things to come out of this awful virus, it may be that going forward, you can think to yourself, well, our young people, they are switched on to social media, and they do. I mean, I get my son and my stepson. They contact me via all manner of stuff. I'm just thinking, if going forward, what we can take forward is maybe more of a slightly more relaxed approach to keeping contact with our young people, and by that I mean they can kind of drop in and speak to people, over their phones. I'm just wondering potentially how you might be able to sort of going forward, perhaps change your system, and just a final thing about what other things that may have emerged from COVID that might sort of change the practice and the way you do things going forward. Thanks. Thank you.
Yeah, do you want me to answer?
Yes, Amy. Yes, please.
Yeah, I think anecdotally from across maybe the leaving care and the youth housing service mainly, because that's where we're looking at kind of those sort of 16 to up to 21-year-olds. Yeah, absolutely live in a virtual world already, don't they? And very au fait with all the digital technology. So I think for many of those young people, they'd sort of anecdotally fed back that they liked that element of it, and they found that easier to do sometimes than kind of having to get out of bed maybe and show up to meetings and that kind of thing. And definitely, you know, with all of our services, we like to take feedback from young people. You know, when we're looking at when we're managing them through the contract management process, we like to take their feedback and feed that back into service delivery to make sure that what we are commissioning and what we're delivering is what those young people sort of want and need. But I think we'll need to consider this really carefully, obviously alongside the managers, parenting manager and those services. We wouldn't want to remove any of that face-to-face element, because sometimes that's something that we need to make sure that they're okay, to make sure that they're kind of on track, they're following those plans. Sometimes it's easier to hide in a digital world, isn't it? And if they're just behind that screen and we change that completely, then there could be that kind of element of risk there. But I can see Kerry's hands up, and I'm wondering whether maybe she wants to add something to that. But I think it's definitely something we will look at now going forward. You know, one of the positive things that we can bring out of those lessons learned from COVID about how we can, you know, fine tune those services again, I suppose. But yeah, I don't think we'd want to go totally digital, because I think we'd worry about the risk that would pose to some of those young people. I can see, sorry, Kerry and Bridie, colleagues have both got their hands up, probably want to add to that, so I'll let them.
Do you want to go, Kerry?
Yeah, my hand wasn't up, but I have got a point. I think it was up last time. It's okay. Yeah, I mean, I think it's the same, and it's that whole terminology that people are starting to use about that blended approach. But one of the things that I think we really need to kind of look at about, you know, as we start to come to the end, hopefully, of this pandemic, is celebrating how resilient our young people have been and actually changing that culture. Because, you know, some young people have struggled, yes, but a lot of young people have actually really stepped up and shown how resilient they can be, and that's what our job is about, that coaching, mentoring into independence. So I think about looking at that and making sure that young people don't come dependent on us will reduce that cliff edge that we do have when we do close services. So I think the learning out of this is really important.
Bridie, did you want to come in?
Yes, it was just, I suppose, to reiterate both what Amy and Kerry had said, that I think the digital offer and digital ways of keeping in touch with young people have been hugely valuable, but there's always and always will be a need to lay eyes on and visit a young person. Possibly less so with the older age group, but definitely with the younger age group. And, you know, social care would tell you that was true. The other element of digital engagement and virtual engagement has been, you know, the ability, I suppose, and possibly also anecdotally, that keeping in touch, attendance at training, digital offers, all of those things have actually in some ways increased participation. And that's not necessarily young people, but through professionals as well, finding it easier to access online training, online kind of, you know, Facebook peer mentoring, visits, team meetings generally. And I think that for the wider workforce has created both challenges and opportunities that, you know, going forward would indeed benefit children in the longer term. And there's evidence of that and sort of descriptions of that from officers through the report.
Thank you, Bridie, for that. Now, I can't see anyone else wanting to speak, so I'll just sum up if that's okay. Kerry, you've got your hand up, but I think it's from the past, isn't it? That's the only one I can see. It's now disappeared, so I presume that's fine. Yeah, thank you for that. And it's an excellent report. Couple of things I wanted to say, and I think you've covered it. I think the idea of virtual and remote learning has been a great boost to us during this pandemic, and obviously there's advantages to it. But again, I think the panel have said that, yes, that's good, it's an addition, but we wouldn't want to do away with the face-to-face meeting, because as a member of the older generation, I do like to see how looked after children. I do like to attend V4Cs and big conversations, and it wouldn't be the same for us anyway as counsellors doing it virtually all the time. So I think we've learned some really good lessons from that. And just going back to Councillor Fuchs and his offer, well, it wasn't an offer, it was a suggestion that we use Scampton. Well, I'm going to throw Cranwell into it, because if we are going to put our young children into good homes, and I know the RAF personnel do have good homes, I would probably rather them be in Cranwell than Scampton, but perhaps that's something that our officers can look at anyway. So, yeah, now I see that we've got one of our senior officers leaving, but I'm sure she'll be back shortly. That's Janice. So, having summed up, I think what the panel now need to do, we've received the report, we support it and we endorse it, the updated action plan. And I'm just going to pause for a moment before moving on. Does anyone disagree with the report? Has anyone not happy with it? Now's your chance, otherwise we'll move on. And I can't see on the screen anyone saying anything, so thank you. And that is agreed. And Amy and Bridie, thank you very much. And yeah, it's a good report. And yeah, as usual, we're very proud of the work that you all do. And we'll look forward to the next report coming to us. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Lovely. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you.
Moving on, now looking at item 7, Lincolnshire Virtual School, and we are to consider a report from Kieran Barnes, the Virtual School Head Teacher, on an overview of services provided by the Virtual School to support the improvement of educational outcomes of children in care and those previously in care for the academic year 2019 to 2020. So good morning, Kieran, and over to you.
Yeah, good morning, Councillor Brailsford. I intend to be fairly brief in my introduction, if that's okay. Really, the report is a pretty detailed report, and I'll leave plenty of time for questions afterwards. Really, the thrust of the report, I suppose, covers 2 periods, pre-COVID and during COVID. And I suppose 2 things are kind of interlinked, and I hope the report gives a sense of how the virtual school has performed and worked over the entire year. We've spent a lot of time over the last number of years working hard to better understand our kids, because I think it's key for us to before we can actually improve outcomes for our looked after youngsters, we firstly have got to understand them. Consequently, a lot of work has gone in to actually work more closely with our carers through Caring to Learn, more closely with our social workers through the PEP process, with our schools, to actually improve outcomes in education. And actually, in many ways, that work had complemented what happened during the COVID period and our response to that to mitigate the impact of that. I trust that the report gives a sense of that. And that hard work that we have been put in over this last number of years has had the positive impact of indicating that the work of the virtual school has been fairly effective in reducing the number of exclusions for looked after youngsters, for instance. Our attendance at school, our kids are terrific. They turn up on a regular basis, and that was the case throughout COVID. So our ability to work together through Caring to Learn, as I mentioned earlier, with our foster carers. So a pretty positive picture, really. Undoubtedly, there are some issues, some nutty issues, as there always will be, and some bumps in the road. But overall, I think the report gives a fair impression of the work that we've done over the last year, and that we have been quite effective and impactful in terms of mitigating the impact of COVID. So with that said, I'll just open myself up for questions.
Thank you, Kieran. Now, I don't know, Councillor Fuchs wants to come in. I've got a few questions as well, Kieran, but I'll probably come in at the end. So, Rob, over to you, please.
Thank you, Kieran, for yet another really good report.
Thank you.
I just like, first of all, I want to say, with the electronic, PEPs, well done. I see you've got really, really high, 98% is the lowest, and all the others are 100%. That's really excellent stuff. However, on the exclusions, there's been talk on the news. You've heard it saying that disadvantaged children are having a hard time because their broadband is not particularly good and all this kind of thing. So is there any evidence emerging that schools might be using that as an excuse to exclude children they're not keen on having?
I have to say that neither anecdotally or in terms of any hard evidence, I haven't witnessed that in terms of looked after youngsters. That's certainly the case. So I can't really comment on the broader community, but that's not something that I've encountered in our work over the last, well, is it year since March? No, we're probably 10 months, particularly through the COVID situation. Well, that's all that I really need to say on that. I have no evidence of that.
Great, thank you very much. Thanks, David. You're muted, David.
I am muted. I'll repeat again. I think Mark wanted to come in, so over to you, Mark.
Yes, thanks, David, and thanks, Kieran, for a really good report. I'm just wondering, because it's great. Obviously, in Lincolnshire we do have the virtual school. I'm just wondering, at the moment, with an awful lot, and it's just going to be a bit of a flyer of a question, really. Given our expertise in the virtual school, would we potentially have any lessons that we could share with schools at the moment that are trying to educate their own children at home? I'm just thinking in terms of, we obviously learned, we offer a really great service. Is there anything that potentially we could offer in terms of help and advice to other schools who are trying during the pandemic to educate at home or educate their children at home? Thanks.
I think one of the issues probably is that schools have a plethora of advice at this point in time in terms of what they're providing at home. There's any number of private entities who are providing schools with resources. You've got BBC Bite Size, you've got all of that kind of stuff. Many secondary schools have already got very robust platforms where they provide for their kids 5 lessons a day, as they would do in school. So the picture out there is actually quite positive in lots of ways. Certainly, we do suggest to some schools to maybe perhaps have a look at one school down the road as providing, if we feel that the quality of what they do isn't quite up to standard. But I really couldn't see what we could offer the schools any over and above what's already out there, because although the picture back in March was a little patchy, let's just say. At this point in time, I think there is some clear guidance to schools on what the expectations of the provision for kids at home is. I think that the structure of the ecology out there is so rich that actually there is no reason why schools can't provide a rich and worthwhile curriculum from the stuff that they've got at this point.
Thank you, Mark. Is that answer your question, Mark?
Yes, thanks.
Yeah. Okay. Councillor Kelly wants to come in, but Councillor Kelly, you're muted at the moment.
As an ex-teacher, and I still got contacts with my friends who are still teaching. I think the teachers are doing an excellent job, and I think the pupils are really responding to online learning. The one thing that I think would be really good for the students, and I'm not saying this every day, but maybe once a week, is to actually meet their form teacher. And for their form teacher, because obviously pastorally your form teacher is really important, so I don't want to put any more burden on teachers, but I think it would be nice if they could say to their pupils, how you're getting on. Obviously people could just say fine, but I just think it would be a good strategy for some face-to-face contact online, just so that they aren't just doing lessons online and bite size and everything else, which I think has been put together and is very, very effective. If I used to be a sixth form tutor, because I taught mainly sixth form subjects, and I think it would be a really good strategy just to say, how are you coping? Are there any issues? And that's obviously, if you've got a class of 30, maybe you could just see 10 a week. I don't know, because obviously we don't know how long that is going to go on. But I think it would be a really good way of improving communication between teacher and pupil. Thank you.
Yeah, certainly, and I am aware that there is some really good practice already in existence across Lincolnshire around that. Certainly, most primary schools are contacting their more disadvantaged kids if they're not attending on a regular basis. That's part of their safeguarding process. But I know that has grown, and actually they have become much more inclined to contact kids on a regular basis, as you've just outlined. So I'm not so certain about the secondary. I do know that they have things like formal assemblies, etc., etc. The head teachers do those kinds of things. And again, there are some good examples I know in Lincoln of what you're outlining there. So it's already happening, and whether it's consistent across the piece, I don't know.
Yeah, thank you for that, Kieran. And I'd like to thank the members for some good questions there and good input into it. Kieran, a couple of questions for you, if you don't mind. The first one. We've seen on the television, and we get conflicting reports. Some schools say they've had no laptops for the disadvantaged children, and some schools seem to have had plenty of laptops. Depends which school the reporter goes to. But one question: we are corporate parents of several hundred children in care, right? Mm-hmm. How many laptops have we, as corporate parents, issued to our children?
Okay, so if I could kind of answer that in reverse, if I may. At this point in time, the majority of our looked after youngsters have some form of electronic equipment that they can access learning through. Okay. Last week, when schools shut down, we had a request for 4 laptops from our complete cohort. Yeah. And they were issued through the school. So there is a process now in place whereby the schools issue directly to the kids, yeah, if they are identified to have a specific need. That's not just the laptops. That's also things like dongles, additional data, etc., etc., etc. That hadn't been the case. That the allocation of IT equipment has been patchy from March through June, July, August, but it has been an improving picture in the autumn term, whereby schools were expected to identify their most disadvantaged kids who didn't have laptops, and for them to directly engage with the DFE to supply them. So an improving picture. The majority of our kids now have laptops or electronic devices where appropriate. It's not appropriate for all of our young people necessarily. Some of the kids are very young. Some have disabilities that perhaps, it may not be the right thing for the young person to have a laptop. But by and large, the picture is an improving one. And as I say, over this last week, we've had a request for 4 laptops, and I just got news this morning that all of those kids received the electronic equipment that they required. As I say, somebody may be able to pop out of the bush and say, hey, Kieran, that's not quite the case because X, Y, and Z. But to the best of my knowledge, that is the case. And we are rag rating that on a fairly regular basis now to ensure that the kids have it when they come into care. Do you have a laptop? School needs to provide that, and we're working on that at this point in time, so that we avoid any backlog that we may have had in the past.
Thanks for that, Kieran. Before I let Councillor Kelly, I think she wants to come back in, but on that one, it's reassuring to know that I thought it may have been more than 4, but if we do get more requests through the schools, are you confident that we'll be able to meet the demand? Because I'm concerned now that schools will not go back after the half term in February. They may be off until March. So it could well be that more requests will come along. How confident are you that we'll be able to meet the demand however it comes?
Okay, so it's far better for the demand to be met by the school, because the issue very often is that when we have provided laptops, and I don't want to get into the detail of that, because of licensing issues, because of safeguarding issues, and because of the need to constantly upgrade the computer, when we plug in, we get updates. The school really has to provide it because they've got the software, they've got the safeguard stuff. So it's far better that it comes through that way. I'm not so sure. I don't honestly know the supplies in terms of what the DFE have at this point in time. But I will say that historically, again, back in the past, when the DFE was purchasing all of the laptops, it was really difficult for us to attain them through couriers, etc., and they became very expensive. So that was an issue in the past. I don't know what the situation is going forward. I'm presuming that the DFE has a supply and it understands what the need is. So consequently, I can only tell you that I can't really give you a direct answer in terms of how things will be going forward.
I hope that DFE do know. Yeah, Councillor Kelly, thank you for that, Kieran. Councillor Kelly, did you want to come back in, please?
Yes, please. This might be beyond the remit of this committee. Obviously, one of the problems that we have in a large rural county like Lincolnshire is the lack of broadband facilities in some of the more remote areas. I just wondered, obviously, issuing a laptop or any technological equipment wouldn't be any use. Have you come across that as a problem? Because I know that has been an issue, during the time I've been a councillor.
Okay. Surprisingly not. I thought that would be a big issue, but it hasn't been. It's been an issue, but it hasn't been a big one. So along with the issuing of laptops and other devices, the DFE and schools also now are working together to provide data for 4G, for instance. So if a family is in a situation where it hits a certain criteria, they are provided with free data through BT or whatever it is, so they can hotspot stuff off their phones at no additional expense. So I think that's a major step forward. I give that a big tick. But as a safeguard from the virtual schools perspective, it's one of the issues that we've got in terms of whether kids should be in school or not. There's a whole issue around school attendance, particularly around the age profile, etc., and concerns that our carers have. But where one of the criteria for me is if the kid can't access remote learning, then they need to be in school. So there's two ways that we've attempted to address that. Get them a dongle, get them sorted. That's problematic. If they can't access it and they need to, well then it's kind of obvious the kid needs to be in school. So that's the way we've dealt with that.
Thank you, Kieran. Yeah, thank you. Very pragmatic of you as usual. So yeah, thank you very much for that. Now, I don't believe there's any other members want to speak. I'll just pause slightly before I sum up. I can't see anything on the screen. No, okay. So the panel are requested to accept the report and agree the recommendations contained on page 79, which is right at the back of the report. And before we go any further, is everyone in agreement with that, or shall I put it another way? Does anyone dissent from accepting the report? Right, I don't see any one for that, so thank you, and that is agreed. And Kieran, thank you very much. And on behalf of the members, if you can thank your team, because I know it's a very large team, and I know you get involved in many areas now. It's developed over the years, as you said at the beginning of the report. And during this pandemic, I think they've done a brilliant job. And I also would add to that I don't think we're any way out of it yet. I think we talk about last year and how bad it was. I think at the moment, going forward for the next few weeks is going to be extremely difficult with schools, whether they close or whether they remain open or whatever. So, yeah, you've done brilliant work, and I just hope that we can continue for as long as is necessary. So, Kieran, on behalf of the councillors, thank you very much for the efforts of your team. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Now moving on, back onto obviously still on the main agenda, it's the next item, which is item 8, the Young Inspectors Project update, and we are going to consider a report from Katrina Hewitt, who's the project officer for Lincolnshire Young Inspectors, on a summary and overview of activities with regard to Lincolnshire Young Inspectors Project. So good morning, Katrina. I can't see you on the screen at the moment, but I'm hoping that you're there somewhere.
Hi, good morning. Yes, I don't have great internet out in the sticks, unfortunately. I can see my camera. Yeah, it's just loading up, just takes forever. So yeah, good morning, everybody. Thank you for inviting me to do another update on the Young Inspectors Project. I can't believe it's been a year since we were last talking about it, but yeah. So as we were asked to do, we've done a report over the last year of activities of the Young Inspectors Group. Does anyone need me to do an overview of the project? Are you happy with that?
I think it's only a few pages, Katrina, and unless anyone has any other views, I'm happy for you to quickly scan over it, and then we can. I mean, I've got some questions, and I'm sure other members will as well. So, if there's anything particularly you want to say, then say it. But then I can let members come in and ask questions sooner rather than later.
Okay, yeah, that's fine. So the project has been carrying on not quite as normal, obviously. Last year we had a particularly busy February half term, and you'll see in the report that we carried out a number of inspection work, in particular the liaise service, which is an LCC Commission project, which is the Send Information and Support Service. Luckily, we got that piece of work in because since then, obviously due to restrictions, we haven't carried out very much inspection work at all. So we're quite a large group of young volunteers ordinarily, although in restrictions that has kind of tailed off a little bit. But I'm pleased to see that a lot of the members are still engaging. So as you'll see, last year we did the liaise inspection. We also did a piece of work about missing report, and just bear with me because my report has now gone off my screen, which is not very helpful. Me and technology are not best friends.
Not the only one, Katrina. Not the only one, Katrina. So don't worry about that. It's completely
gone. I don't know where it's gone. Anyway, I know the project, so I'll kind of talk around it. Yeah. So luckily, the first part of last year they were really busy, really well engaged, and since then we've been meeting online. So as the report outlines, we've got quite a large cohort. About half of them now are active, and we are meeting online. We've done a lot more sort of social meetings this past sort of 8 or 9 months, and that's been really good actually to kind of touch base and you know, just keep in touch with the young inspectors. Going forward, we've got quite a number of pieces of work that are in the pipeline that we're actually meeting next week to discuss. So last year we'd scoped out a whole inspection work about in relation to the church safeguarding, and myself and another member of staff had scoped the young inspectors about an inspection we're going to carry out about safeguarding and young people accessing safeguarding within churches. Now that's currently paused, but we are looking at whether that's something we could perhaps start doing online. So that's certainly something we're going to talk to them about. We've also been invited now, which I'm thrilled about, is to take part in a wider quality and standards audit that's forthcoming, which is about language, which is a really important topic, as you'll probably be aware, in children's services at the moment. And part of that is going to be utilising young inspectors to speak with young people who are within children's services to talk about language. So that's something that we're going to be taking part in, obviously, remotely. Beyond that, we unfortunately haven't been able to meet face-to-face for quite some time now, but we are still trying to meet online. And just sort of trying to keep young people engaged and excited for future inspection work. So I'm happy if anyone has any questions, because my report has gone.
Thank you for that, Katrina. Yes, I can see we have got Councillor Fuchs wants to come in. I've got a few questions as well, but I'll come in at the end if that's okay. So, Rob, over to you.
Thank you. Thanks, Katrina. I don't know. Do other counties do this young inspectors thing? Because it sounds really exciting. If I was, a young person, I mean, it sounds a bit cloak and daggery as well,
Yeah, they'd like to think of themselves as little spies, but it's a nationwide project. It's not just an LCC sort of we didn't come up with it, basically. Sheffield has got quite an active young inspectors project. Other areas have got sort of similar projects. Doncaster, for example, they have young advisors. I would like to kind of meet with them a little bit more, because actually what I would like to do in the future is look at how we can get our young people engaging with things such as like the corporate parenting panel, particularly, you know, young people that are within social care. And I'd really, Ben Lilly, my line manager, and I have talked about it quite a bit. But just going back to your question, yeah, there's quite a few inspectors. In the past year, 18 months, I've actually been approached a few times. One was North East Lincolnshire, actually, about them setting up their own young inspectors project. So actually, people are approaching Lincolnshire young inspectors as a good kind of project to base their own ideas on, which is really great to share good practice. So yeah, I think
do the young inspectors, when they become one, is there a formal training process that they go through, and or like, for instance, looking at case studies from, you know, previous inspections, and ex young inspectors who might pass on their wisdom, you know, they may make a video presentation of their time and that kind of thing, to give the youngsters, when they join, an idea of what's involved?
It's a really good question. So we didn't have a formal training induction, as it were. Last year we were looking at developing that. Obviously, that's kind of one of those things that's kind of taken a bit of a back burner. But what I've done previously is during half term, we've had a day where we've had new members have like a bit of a training day. So I was based at Mile Cross, and we used to use one of the training rooms, and we'd have like team building kind of activities. Like you suggested, some of the other more experienced young inspectors, they would talk about past inspections, you know, expectations there, what they want to sort of achieve from the project. So it wasn't ever a formal process, but it was always really fun, and actually, you know, sharing that sort of peer kind of led activity was really helpful, and it was a really good way of retaining volunteers as well. Some of the volunteers that we have, they like to move into a bit more of a coaching role, so they like to sort of take them under their wing, as it were, which is really great, and obviously good for their development as well.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you very much, Katrina. Thank you, David.
Thank you, Rob. Before I go over to Mark, I see Yvonne Sherwood's joined. Yvonne, did you want to come in? The thing's flashing on my screen.
No, I didn't want to come in. I'm sorry, Councillor Brailsford. I keep coming in and out. My connectivity is terrible at the moment. So I apologise for being disruptive without even making an effort to be so.
Don't worry about that, Yvonne. Most of us have had problems this morning. I don't know why. Anyway, so thanks for that. I'm going to go to Mark now, please. Mark Whittington.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chairman. I just want to thank Katrina for a report. It's really positive report to see. Just one question, which is on page 82, regarding the inspection work that was completed in sort of 1920, and 25 children's centres were visited. What proportion of the total number of children's centres in the county is that? Is that all of them, or 60% or whatever? And if it's not, is there any plans to visit the rest of them? And in terms of the inspection work going forward, I'm just wondering if at some point, because obviously, hopefully our young people are not only engaged at school, but maybe engaging in outside activities. I'm thinking in terms of they may be members of sports clubs or youth clubs or the Scouts and Guides. Just wondering potentially in terms of sort of our inspection work, if there are any plans maybe for future years to start looking at some of those other organisations with which our young people might be involved. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. So your first comment about the children's centres, so it was about 50%. I believe there are I haven't got the report in front of me, but I believe there's around about 55, don't quote me on that, but there's definitely around the 50 mark children's centres. So we visited at least half, which was actually a really great undertaking, because we made sure that we went across all of the county, because different counties have different types of children's centres, and obviously the rurality, and some are attached to schools, for example. So we wanted to make sure that we had a wide selection of children's centres. And the logistics of taking 2 or 3 young inspectors across the county, sometimes quite challenging, and lots of McDonald's were involved. So, I think we did quite well with the 50% there. That was really well received, that report. And actually, your second point about returning, we, as young, when I say we, I just have the logistical job, and probably the boring bit is the young inspectors that do the work. But we like to return to a service once we've put in a report with the young inspectors' recommendations and findings. And the idea is we invite the service back to update them on what they're doing in response to that, with a view to a re-inspection at some point in the future. Now, that was going to happen, and of course, currently we're not able to do that. But I actually line manage the chairs of Lincolnshire Young Voices project as well. And what we've decided to do is that they're going to, not a re-inspection, but they're going to inspect children's centres. In fact, they've already started it. They sent out a questionnaire a couple of months ago with a view to looking at how accessible the children's centres are. So by using the young inspectors' findings and recommendations, it's gone on to the Young Voices project with a view to re-inspect in a way, but with a different sort of priority, as it were. Can I just clarify your third point? Were you asking if we were looking at joining other youth groups?
It was just really in terms of sort of potential inspection work going forward. I mean, I know that there's a lot of other activities that young people involved in. Hopefully, are looked after. Children are hopefully involved with. I was thinking about sports clubs and youth clubs, if any are in the Scouts or the Guides. Those kind of things, and I know that lots of towns have Army cadets or Air Force cadets or whatever. I'm just wondering potentially if, and I guess it depends on numbers, but if there'll be any sort of plans maybe to sort of, just in terms of future inspection work, to maybe expand to other organised, because it's really in response to the point on the bottom of page 82 where some of your future work is with the Church of England churches, and obviously where young people are involved. I was thinking about potentially other activities in which our young people could be involved. Thanks.
Yeah, definitely, and that's certainly on my agenda that I would like to certainly get across more of the county. When we were meeting face to face, we were meeting in Grantham and Lincoln, which logistically was a bit challenging, because obviously not all young people live in Grantham or Lincoln, so we were having a lot of travel. Now it's online, of course, it's almost a little easier. There's always been a bit of an issue with young inspectors projects in the East Coast, which is something I'd like to pick up again, when restrictions allow. But in terms of other groups, I've got good links with young carers, and I'm often invited to do presentations with young inspectors to them about perhaps some of the young carers would like to, come on board with some of the inspection work that we're doing. As I say, I line manage the Young Voices, and we've got a great working relationship with them. Scouts definitely is something I would like to look into, and if anyone has any contacts, that would be great if they would forward those, or Air Cadets, Army Cadets, that would be a really great connection. I am, since we've been in lockdown, have set up, some of our young inspectors have been doing some online learning with ASDAN, which is a qualification that they can accrue credits for. And it might be that that fits in with some of the Air Cadets. I know that they do a similar sort of thing. So if anyone's got any contacts, that'd be really appreciated.
Thank you. Is that okay, Mark?
Yeah, that's fine. I mean, in terms of, I know, my main activity involving young people was, well, it's finished now. I used to, after I retired from playing rugby, I was a coach of some of our junior teams at our local club, and I was part of our training. In order to become a qualified coach, we had to do a children's safeguarding course, which was a fundamental part of that. But I know the large organisations like the Rugby Football Union, the FA, and I'm presuming other sports organisations do have similar sort of safeguarding courses and things like that. Just thinking that there may be some of our young people, they may be involved with local sports clubs, but I know that the regional administrative bodies are really keen to make sure that all young people can engage in sport regardless of their backgrounds safely and to enjoy it and to gain something positive from it. Thanks.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Katrina. Katrina, you mentioned something, and it's something that's struck a chord with me straight away. Obviously, at some time we'll come out of this pandemic and we'll go from virtual meetings to actually having proper meetings, as I call them, and access to other areas of the county. Yes, it's great that you meet in Lincoln. It's great that you meet in Grantham as well. But you mentioned the East Coast. It's a vast county, isn't it? Are you likely to come up with any obstacles for going further afield? Because I think it's important that we cover the whole of the county. I mean, I know that a lot of our young people are in Lincoln. I know there are a number in Grantham as well. But there's an awful lot down the East Coast, and it's a vast area to cover. I mean, if you go from Boston all the way up almost to Grimsby, it's a huge area. That area alone is much greater than some counties in their entirety. So, are you likely to meet any obstacles in getting further out into the county?
I'd like to think not. I mean, currently the team, the structure is at the moment, is that I'm now managed by Ben, who is the Quality and Standards team manager. Then there's myself as project officer. We have 2 apprentices, young inspector apprentices, that are currently vacant positions. So currently there technically is just me, although I've managed so far that we get across the county. In terms of reaching across the rest of the county, I'm part of the participation team, and as you know, V4C group is sort of overseen by the participation team. And we're actually in talks at the moment as to how I can perhaps get a little bit more involved with that in terms of getting out there to the V4C groups, which I have attended a couple, with a view to actually A, seeing their venues that they hold them at, and B, meeting the youth development workers to see how to engage with their cohort of young people. So there were plans prior to lockdown. I did do a couple of sessions at Boston at their youth centre and got some interest. So there's definitely, I can't envisage any issues as such. We have got the links with the other team, and that's the plan going forward. So other than constraints on there just being me, hopefully not.
Yes, I mean, you mentioned there you are part of the participation team, and that's leading me on to the next question, actually. And I know Ben very well. We are shortly, it's with the Executive Council at the moment. She spoke to me yesterday about this. As you know, annually we put a TELUS survey out, which comes from the participation team. Looking at your workload going forward, do you think that the young inspectors would welcome input into that TELUS survey? Because it's a survey that appears to be put forward by adults for our young children and young people. And I wonder whether the young inspectors could streamline it and ask a different or add to the range of questions that we ask of them. Is that something that you think that you could take on board moving forward?
I'd absolutely relish that opportunity because, you know, going back to my previous point earlier, I'm really passionate about young people being at the heart of things that we do within the county council, and I think there's real improvements to be made, and I'd really like to kind of, you know, I'm trying to sort of start that process really. So anything that kind of involves young people and gets their views, I would be more than happy, and I think young inspectors would be as well. Certainly capacity wise, you know, while we're meeting online, we are restricted about how many physical inspections we can carry out, which is obviously quite time consuming. So yeah, both sort of both sides of that really, yes, is the answer, definitely.
Thank you for that. And unbeknown to you, Katrina, I got the result I wanted because immediately Janice Spencer's put a hand up. She wants to come in and say something. So Janice, over to you.
Thank you, Councillor Brailsford. Yeah, no, I think it's a really, really good point. And what I was just going to say is that the telesurvey is coming to exec DLT next week. So obviously you'll be able to comment on it there. But I was wondering if it should be a joint venture with young inspectors and maybe V4C.
Yeah,
as they both sit in Katrina's service. That might be, you know, give some additionality as well from the care experience children was just what I was thinking. You've opened it up wide now.
That was the intention, Janice. And Katrina, thank you very much for that report. Before we move on, I think that virtually answers my questions, and we've had councillors involved as well. I'll pause before we move on, but to give anyone a chance to come in. But before I do that, I propose that we receive the report and accept it. And before we actually confirm that, is there anyone who wants to add anything or dissent from that, please? It doesn't appear so. So, Katrina, thank you very much for that. And Janice, thank you for coming in at the end there. And yeah, we look forward to moving forward. And I think I was slightly pessimistic that I'll be leaving the scene very shortly. But one of the issues with the COVID is that there's a possibility that we may get the elections postponed for a few months. So perhaps that was something that I would very much like to see before I leave the scene. So I thank you for that, and we do accept the report, Katrina. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks very much.
Right. Moving on, I've got pieces of paper all over the place. It's now over to Lisa Adams. It's item 9 on the agenda, the Lincolnshire Leaving Care 6-monthly update report, and we are to consider a report from Lisa Adams, Service Manager of Barnardo's Leaving Care Services, on a 6-monthly update provided by Barnardo's, and it's from April to September 2020. A challenging time indeed, Lisa. Over to you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Councillor Brailsford. I do appreciate this time. It would be remiss of me not to start the report really with probably a bit of an update about how the service has moved through the COVID pandemic and what type of service we've tried to offer for Lincolnshire care leavers really. So within the report I've been, like I said, been fairly clear about the type of service we've offered and how that decision making has been made and how we've sort of moved along with that. I have shared this format with the corporate parenting manager, but also with other teams within the local authority, because I just think it's a useful tool really when maybe we are inspected by Ofsted to be able to describe how best we work with our young people. So we have continued to offer face-to-face visits with young people. We've done that right since the start of lockdown. But one of the things that has been good is that we have kept literally a daily log of the visits that we've done and the rationale behind that, really. So in the period that we're talking, in the 6-month period, 720 face-to-face visits were done with young people, with Lincolnshire care leavers. We have done risk assessments now on all 4 of our buildings, and all 4 buildings can be accessed as and when required. There are very clear method statements in place in relation to not only using officers, but also visits that we do to young people, use of things like PPE, use of cars, transporting young people. So we've tried to be fairly thorough. And I guess alongside the local authority, because we had no blueprint, we've been lucky in a way in some of the data that I think we started to collect right from the start of lockdown. We'll be able to we can give a very clear picture of who we had in work, how staff could respond, how many staff we had, how many staff had been self-isolating. And like I said, I guess that's probably more by luck than by planning. But I do think it's useful. And I think the other thing that I just wanted to highlight about the visits and the service to young people, I guess, is that because Bernardo's has been a commissioned service, we've hopefully been able to give some added value to Lincolnshire young people by some of the grants and some of the money that's come directly from Bernardo's during this period. So I've noted some of that on there. There was an initial £3,000 that came in from Bernardo's. We also successfully applied for a £2,000 land aid charity. We've got a partnership with Vodafone and with IKEA. So again, we've been able to do all care leavers who've had children have benefited from packs that were sent out, like teddy bear picnics packs that were sent out for the kids. But we've also got some starter packs from IKEA as well, which were great, which again were targeted, but went out to those young people who were sort of moving into new tenancies, who needed a top up of pots and pans and plates. So all of that's happened during this lockdown period, really. I think, similar to what Kieran said about the IT rollout, we've obviously, as Kieran and the virtual school have been working with schools for the children in care, we have been working with our care leavers to distribute the laptops. It's been a mammoth task. I'm not going to pretend it hasn't. But what we've learned and what we are absolutely supplying is not only the laptop, but also the local authority have agreed for Microsoft Office sort of packages. We've been able to provide data as well, because that tends to be an issue for care leavers, that sometimes you can provide them with the resource, but if you don't provide the data as well, they can't use it. Where possible, we have hand-delivered laptops, obviously socially distant, but we tried to cut down costs by doing that. And the other thing that I just wanted to say about face-to-face visits is, again, we've worked really closely with the local authority about what we are asking staff to do and the message that we are giving about face-to-face visits. Myself and the corporate parenting manager speak daily, nearly, more than once a day, often. So the communication is very good. And at the moment, we are still recommending face-to-face visits for those young people who need it. So, of course, if a young person is happy to have a virtual call, we use things like WhatsApp, we use things like Zoom, we'll text, and we also try and evidence that on the young person's side. But where we have some young people who we absolutely think would benefit from a face-to-face visit, then we will go and just do a doorstop sort of visit with PPE, and we will try and see that young person. In the periods of time where lockdown was lifted, we tried to, again, go out of county to see some young people. And what we were also able to utilise was some of Bernardo's services that are based around the UK. So we had visits down on the south coast. We had visits done in Wales, because we were able to use existing Bernardo's services to actually send out a member of staff to see a Lincolnshire care lead. So that's also been happening. So that's it really as relation to COVID, but I will obviously answer questions on that. As has been mentioned in a number of reports, really, I don't want to be repetitive, but we obviously still continue to run our supported lodging scheme. Again, similar to fostering, some of our supported lodgings providers have been offline due to shielding. But what I would say is they have still maintained contact. So we've got some good examples where some young people have actually moved placements, gone to stay with other family members, but actually the supported lodgings provider has continued to stay in regular contact with them. So that's still their home. They have gone back there. But that sort of support that was offered from somebody independent in a way has continued right the way through lockdown. Supported lodgings panel has continued. We have continued to assess new providers, but I would say that's been fairly slow. We have got a new provider coming online, but again, we just had to delay that because they actually work on a COVID ward. They're a nurse and work on a COVID, so it's just delayed. Delayed has been able to make placements. But like I said, that assessment work still continues, and we won't lose that provider. They'll just come on board a little bit later, really, to the others. That scheme continues to be what I think is a great resource. Those who've been at corporate parenting before will have heard some of the great outcomes that we've had, and especially for where we've had some young people in incredibly expensive out-of-area provision under the age of 18, some with some fairly, what I would say is high-risk mental health needs, and actually they've still been managed within a supported lodging environment. And like you said, that's just to the credit really of not only the providers, but I would also say the support that's offered by the two specialist workers in Barnardo's. Again, a bit. I noticed earlier on there was talk about employment, training, things like that. Now we have seen, of course, we've seen some of our care leavers lose some temporary employment opportunities that they've been working at. We also saw all of the young people who were on the apprenticeship scheme. Nearly all of those were furloughed in the first lockdown. But what I can say is that by July they were all back. So we had 10 young people who were furloughed, but again, we continued to stay in constant contact with them, and all of them went back to their apprenticeship. So although some of those had to be extended, they all went back to work, which was great. Accommodation, like I said, we're very pleased to work with the housing providers that the local authority have sort of had, and as part of the new housing contract that we heard Bridie talk about, again, there's some excellent examples of really good sort of partnership working. I've got to say, I think it helps with the corporate parenting managers sort of straddling across housing and leaving care. I think that absolutely makes sense, and that absolutely helps. But there really have been some good examples where the 30 years of social work experience that I bring to this post, where I've seen other providers sort of say, end placements, but actually I've seen NAPRO just continue to work with us to, ensure that a young person keeps their tenancy really. And like I said, absolute credit really to that service coming on board and delivering what they're delivering. And I suppose the final, like I said, a little bit about a couple of success stories. And again, just a bit of an example of what we've done in lockdown. Like I said, some of the providers have done things like Hope Gyms in the back to the gardens. We've tried to get some good press for Lincolnshire kids. We've done interviews on local radio. As you see from the paperwork, we had a young person do a piece for Look North. We've gone into the national sort of good newspaper, the newsletter that Barnardo's do, talking about Lincolnshire young people. And we've also had some people who've contributed to some of the government work, where they wanted to talk to care leaders about the laptops that were offered, about how they've coped during lockdown. So again, some Lincolnshire young people have taken part in that as well. And I guess finally, just a bit, I know a piece of work that the corporate parenting manager is working on at the moment, which is sort of the covenant, the care leavers covenant, and the work that we're trying to do with other organisations really about offering employment opportunities for our young people. A couple of things that have come online or are coming online. There's the coaching programme that we've done with Serco over this 6-month period, which has been great. So obviously, as you know, Serco is a major sort of contractor with Lincolnshire, and they've helped us develop sort of 6 work coaches where we've been able to link them up with some Lincolnshire care leavers, and they're offering some one-to-one sessions with those care leavers on, in a way, what is tailored to that young person. So if that young person goes into that session and says, I'm doing really well with CVs, but actually I'm struggling at interview, they'll do some coaching on interviews with them, they'll maybe help them just consider things from a different perspective about what employers are actually looking for. They might talk about work readiness. So it just sort of complements that work preparation that we do on a one-to-one basis at the moment in-house. And then also what's come on board literally has been the new the Kickstart programme that's been run through DWP. So again, all young people who are subject to universal credit are able to link into this programme, and it's about, again, trying to look at employment opportunities for them. So again, the links that we already have, that the corporate parenting manager has enhanced really with the DWP, has helped to like I said, in relation to and the final thing that I wanted to say before, if there's any questions, was about participation really. And just to sort of say that during this 6-month period, we have appointed a participation worker. So it's a new post, it's part of the new contract that Bernardo's entered into in April of last year. I suppose what we recognised was that we think on an individual basis, we've got lots of examples where participation on a one-to-one works well. We can see we're able to demonstrate where we've listened to a young person, we've helped them achieve some good outcomes. But actually on a group basis, I would say there's a bit of development. So what we have seen on board are things like a Facebook page for the service, but we recognise we want to do quite a lot more in relation to some targeted group stuff. And that's the best I can describe it really. We don't want to tread on the toes of the participation team within the council. We're happy to work alongside them, and we've certainly had a few discussions with them during the 6 months. But that new worker's come on board now. He just started in post literally. So I'm able to just talk a little bit more about how that sort of group participation has sort of moved forward in the service. So I think that's it in relation to the report. But like I said, I'm answering questions.
Thank you, Lisa. I've got 2 councillors at the moment who've indicated they'd like to speak and ask questions. So I'll do this in order, and it will be Mark followed by Rob. So over to you, Mark, please.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman, and thanks, Lisa, for a very comprehensive report and also for your comments. Just a very quick question, really. On the bottom of page 92, top of 93, you're referring to developing good links with the district council housing teams across the county. I'm just wondering, as part of that, do you also work with housing associations as well? Because I know quite a lot of district councils, quite a lot of their social housing provision is actually managed via housing associations, which is my first question. And my second one is looking at the figures for children in education, employment and training, and obviously the table at the top of page 94, obviously, you know, I think it's only to be expected. There's obviously, it looks like there's been a drop off in performance due, I guess, to COVID. So really the question would be, I mean, this is a really difficult one, I know, because we could be in the pandemic for another 3 months, it could be another 6 months, but I guess you're confident that the ones we do re-emerge into some kind of normality, that those figures would actually improve again. But I'm noticing that when we are in normal, the target is 65%. Would you have any plans once you've got over the pandemic and recovered to potentially maybe look at trying to perhaps increase that 65% target a little bit higher. Thanks.
Thank you. No, thank you. And it may be that, so for the first question in relation to housing associations, I may ask Andy to come on this call, but what I can, just because Andy Morris, Corporate Parenting Manager, is absolutely sort of acts as the, I'm saying the go-between between ourselves and the district councils in relation to housing. But Andy has also gone to housing associations. We do sometimes just hit some. There is not an issue strategically. There is absolutely a policy in place that talks about care leave, having traditionally, they're just.
Lisa, we've lost you on that. We've got a bad connection on that. So, do you want me to get Andy to come in on that? And then perhaps we can come back later on. Yeah. I don't know if Andy is still around. Yes. So
yeah, I'm still here. Just really briefly. I know exactly what Lisa was going to say in respect of our relationship with district councils. We've got some really good relationships with district councils, and we've got really good strategic links and protocols and policies in place into relation to prioritising the needs of looked after children and care leavers on housing registers and making sure they're high priority if they present as homeless, etc. But often that kind of strategic message doesn't always make it down to the operational front. So a lot of what Lisa and I find ourselves battling with in relation to the relationship with district councils is that strategically at senior manager level, when I contact some of the assistant directors of district councils, say, why is the protocol not being adhered to? They automatically send the diktat straight down the line to the frontline member of staff, and the issue is resolved. So I think there is a bit of a gap within district councils between that strategic and operational knowledge of what our responsibilities are, what we've all agreed to, and that's probably the biggest battle we have. But as soon as we get through that threshold of understanding with some of the really frontline junior operational staff, that the problem's resolved quite quickly. Have you got a better connection now, Lisa? Is that pretty much where you were going?
Yes, I've turned my camera off. Can you hear me?
Oh, that's much better.
That's better. I'm
Great.
sure it's not that you don't want to see me, but but you're right, Andy. That's exactly what I was going to say. So you're absolutely right. It was exactly what I was going to say. And therefore, and like you said, so we have had to look. We would also use that strategy with housing associations. I wouldn't say that there has been a major issue there, though. Generally, it's been, like I said, it has been cases. The individual cases have tended to be district council cases, and like I said, they're very quickly resolved. In relation to the question that you asked about the employment and training, it's always going to be the most difficult indicator to try and influence. And it's something that we talk about monthly at commissioners' meetings. So what I would say is that I think, do we have the right range of services that we are offering our care leavers? And what I would say is, yes, I do. I think those partnerships are there. I think we've worked hard, like you said, to create a really good working partnership with DWP, where we are linking to all of the job centres, and we have named workers in there. So that strategically is working well. But we are still in the position where, and I always go back to this quote, that some of our young people are not even job centre ready, never mind ready to work. And that is difficult, therefore, to influence change. But that doesn't mean that we don't do that. That doesn't mean that we don't aim higher, and that we won't be aiming higher. But all I would say is, like I said, I think it's acknowledged really within commissioning meetings that it is always going to be a very difficult, like I said, performance indicator to make much headway on. And I don't know if Kerry, if you wanted to say anything else on that.
Yeah, I think it's just really important. And again, we were doing some work nationally, but also locally with young people around this. And one of the important things that's come out for them around language, it's a bit like, young people don't want to be called lack. is actually EAT is not where some young people will end up, and that's due to a lot of different circumstances, parenthood. So it's more about looking at what is the positive destination for each of our young person. Yes, absolutely, with the aspiration and the intention that they will get into education, employment, training. But for some young people, for a variety of trauma and barriers that are in their way, actually that's not where they'll end up. But it doesn't mean that they don't have a positive destination that they're trying to achieve. It could be that they're getting into the mental health services. It could be that they're getting accommodation. So yeah, I do think we are doing everything we can, and we're just starting now a working group around making sure that we've got all the different government initiatives and all the different approaches that the local authority doing and that we do personally, to draw a pathway to make sure that we're not missing any young people. But one of the biggest bits that we looked at was the therapy role, and we're looking at getting a therapist for the service. So the kind of barriers that we find, we're doing stuff about. And I think, yeah, we've got evidence that we're trying our best with every young person. But it is sometimes about positive destination rather than education and training.
Thanks for that, Kerry. I think that's very, very true, actually. Yes, I think we've got Rob and then Cleo. So, Rob, you next.
Thank you, David. Thanks, Lisa. Your quality was going down a bit during some of that, so I didn't get all of it. And just so you know, it's rain's turned to sleet here in Stamford. Anyway, on what Mark was saying about accommodation and what we were saying earlier on in agenda item 6 on sufficiency and housing and MOD, I was wondering if possibly this is something Andy, the corporate parenting manager, who is an expert at making the impossible possible, if he could sort of have a think about, getting the MOD involved here, because there's loads of bases. There's, like David said, there's Cranwell, there's Coningsby, there's Scampton, Waddington, and army bases as well. And you never know. I'm sure there'll be tons of resistance from them, but it might just be possible. And if anybody could do it, I'm sure Andy could, get something to work there. Anyway, going on to my question, on page 94 of the report, and you've got Serco involved with some mentoring. Is there any scope, do you think, that could be extended to Lincolnshire University? That's it. Thanks.
I think certainly this has obviously been a bit of a pilot for us. It's been very, what I call handpicked, because in a way we had to think about those young people that we thought would be receptive to that sort of one-to-one coaching. And so I do think we're doing a bit of a review. So that means that all of the sorry.
Lisa, we've lost you again. Do you want to have a reset? And I don't know whether Kerry wants to come in or not.
Yeah, I can. Yeah, we're having a review of that process at the moment to check how it's been going. So it's been a bit of a pilot to check on kind of frequency, relationships, how that coaching's been going, so that we make sure that when we kind of branch out with the project that we do it knowing that it's going to work. And obviously, again, COVID has slowed some of those things down with capacity of service and also of the employers. But yes, it is absolutely. And that's part of what the Covenant's supposed to do. It's about bringing all employers. We should be challenging all employers at their corporate parents from vast array of organisations and companies and agencies. Because, again, what will float the boat of one young person to talk to somebody about coaching will be very different to another. So we really want as many companies and agencies to be involved in that as possible.
Great. Thank you very much, Kerry. Thanks, David. Thanks, Lisa.
Thanks, Rob. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, Lisa's still there, so I think she can hear us anyway. But yeah, over to you, Cleo, please, if you can come in next.
Yeah, it was more of a sort of 2 or 3 people have now mentioned how vital NACRO has been, and I just wondered whether anyone has actually told them or said thank you. It was more of a sort of a thingy question as opposed to something specific.
I'll come in if you want, Councillor Brailsford. I could say that yes, I was the commissioning lead for youth housing. Now I work on a daily basis with NACRO, and we are extremely grateful for NACRO. We do tell them all the time how grateful we are, and there's an excellent relationship between NACRO, the local authority and the Leaving Care Service now. I think it's a really strong partnership. So yeah, we absolutely do.
Fantastic. Thank you very much.
Thank you for that, Andrew. Right, I can't see any other members wishing to speak, so I'll just pause for a moment and then move on. It doesn't seem that there's anyone. So what we've been asked to do is to receive the report, which we have done, and we've obviously made a few comments and questions, and thank you very much, Lisa, for that. I know it was difficult for you. We did keep losing you from time to time, but thankfully, Kerry, you came to the rescue, so well done to that. So before we accept the report, I can't see that anyone's wanting to dissent, so I thank you, and that is agreed. So we'll move on, and quickly, before we move on, I'm aware of the time. However, we have got a slightly altered agenda today, so the next item on the original agenda, which was the long-term mental health of children in care in England. It was a project taken by, I believe it was Bristol University. We have deferred that to later in the year. Only comment on that when it does come back. There's an awful lot of questions that we're asking young people, and I just wonder whether how wise that is. So. Anyway, we'll move on from that, and I'm now looking to John, item 11, and I can't find it in the moment, so if you just bear with me, please, for a moment. Time I've got through Bristol University's reams and reams of questions. I really think that to ask, I think I did have a comment with a senior officer earlier this week, and to ask someone to ask something like 50 questions when there was multiple answers, and the report's not finished yet. I just wonder what the effect of that will be. So I've now found where I need to be, and it's item agenda, fostering quarterly performance report, quarter 2. And I'm sure John's around this morning. John Harris.
Yep. I am.
So I'm going to go straight over to you, John.
Okay, and I will, I think, try and keep this brief and just open it up to any questions, because I think you probably are a bit fed up at the sight of me. I seem to be in most panels, really. This is a tried and tested quarterly report. This is relating to quarter 2, to the end of September last year, and it reports basically on all aspects of the fostering service. So all I would do, based on what I've written there, is pick out some of the sort of positive bits and some of the areas of concern, which hopefully I've addressed in some detail for you. The levels of recruitment are positive numerically. We've had to adapt our approach to recruiting people, but we are on target, all things being equal, to virtually double our approval rate of last year. So we're looking at 29 sets of foster carers for mainstream households coming on board this year, which is very positive news. Carer availability, I already talked to that a little bit under the sufficiency item. We have had some difficulties with carer availability because carers are human beings, and they've all got their different sort of health and family related issues, which have meant that some have not wanted to take placements during COVID. That's been particularly an issue within parent and child placements, which Lincolnshire used to be pretty self-sufficient in. Those tend to be carers who are older, more experienced, but also I think there's been quite a lot of resistance to welcoming birth parents into houses when perhaps birth parents haven't adhered to social distancing, etc. That's been a bit of an issue for us. And I think, again, nationally, that seems to be an issue everywhere. Those placements are very much of a premium at this point. Throughout the report, I talk about caring to learn. We've talked about that in different contexts this morning, through the school, etc. Caring to learn approach has very much sort of reinforced, as I think I said last time, the concept of a foster carer community. And that is why I think we are doing everything to try and build. Foster carers are the first line of support to each other. That's what this is showing us. Foster carers are solution focused, and foster carers want to support one another. Anecdotally, someone who was new was struggling with a very young child this year, then to the whatever you call it, Facebook pages, not regular social media things, and had about 15 carers respond pretty quickly to try and support them, give solutions, reassure that it was nothing they hadn't experienced. So just those little bits who make a difference in that situation. We potentially could have lost a carer, but instead I think that carer felt very supported and part of the community. So that is a really big, important issue as far as I'm concerned, and becoming bigger every time we talk about this and every time I report to you. One of the issues I think Councillor Kelly was talking about was about the composition of carers, where we know definitively what our age profile looks like. What we do know is there are certain areas, children, that we do struggle to place more than others. Those may be sibling groups, for example. Nothing new here, I think, to people who've sat around the table for a long time. The issue of permanence, I think, is of concern. We have a big emphasis on family finding. We match quite a lot of children, but we do have a number of children who are coming through subject to care proceedings, 8 to 12 years, with care plans for permanent fostering, and that at times is difficult. So we try to be creative, and hearteningly, we sent out a new form of profile to existing carers only a couple of weeks ago, and 2 of our mainstream carers responded saying they would be interested to talk about the child or the children who require permanence. So it's not a downbeat picture, but I think I've identified it as one of those areas for future challenge, really. In terms of other good news, you'll see we've talked about youth housing. I work obviously very closely with the corporate parenting manager and leaving care. Another part of our armoury for accommodation for care leavers is staying put. And the staying put numbers during COVID have gone up. And staying put usually means, I did say stability. It means employment, education and training. And that is pleasing to see that number remains steadily above 50, which I think is quite heartening. In terms of the service itself, at the end of September, we were looking at some of the challenges. I think we talked throughout this panel and always have talked about, we don't stand still. We're trying to evolve. We're trying to evaluate what works, what we could do differently. And I think the reality here is we're looking at some of the issues in fostering at the moment in terms of numbers or ratio of children in foster placement, retention of foster carers, and we have identified some transformation work which will look at how we shape the fostering service and different aspects of fostering going into the future, and importantly, how we embed fully the Caring to Learn agenda, which I think are our aspirations. So those are the sort of key points I would pull out, but anyone may have picked up other bits, which I'm happy to try to talk to.
Thank you, John. I'm going to come in first. I've not got anyone up at the moment. Yes, I have, but I've started now. Page 145, Learning Homes and the Toolkit. Yes, it's making progress. You've given numbers there, 37 foster homes and 3 residential settings that have achieved. This was up to the end of September, obviously. And it mentions the toolkit. What sort of things does this actually, to achieve this award, what sort of things do we ask foster carers and foster parents and residential homes to do, John?
I think what might be useful is if we got a copy and we circulated it to people. You might actually be interested, because it is a portfolio. It basically is in all range of sort of child development, skills as a foster carer, engagement with children. It covers all of those things, and we ask foster carers to demonstrate how they actually have met that requirement. We provide them with training and mentoring and support to help them achieve the bits that they would be struggling with. So what we've done, every foster carer within the minimum standards has to, within a year, produce their own sort of portfolio, skills portfolio. We've rebranded that under the Caring to Learn banner to say it should be a Caring to Learn portfolio. So I think, without going into the specifics, and I would miss out some of the key bits, it is about child development. It's about working with children in care. But I could usefully get you a copy, which we could circulate. That would give you more information.
Yes, John, if you would, please. I was going to mention this under Kieran's item, but I know it was coming up later on. So, it would, just to give us a little bit more meat for us councillors to fully understand what it actually means. Because it sounds very well, but we can't explain it to anyone what it actually is because we've not seen it. So thanks for that. Now, I think Councillor Fuchs wanted to come in. Is that correct, Rob?
Yes, David, thank you. Thanks, Kieran. On page 139, it's to do with recruitment, and you list some publications that you've advertised in. But I've noticed there's a publication around here called Stanford Living, which is part of the local living group of magazines. And I know the editor, as it turns out. And Stanford Living is one of these glossy mags, and it has all sorts of interesting things in lots of adverts for kitchens and things like that. But it's a kind of, in the old days, it's a sort of magazine that's left lying around in doctors' waiting rooms, for people to read. So if you like, I can approach Nick Rudd-Jones, who's the editor, and ask him if he would be, if he wouldn't mind publishing something that you could write about fostering.
Yeah, well, to be honest, sorry, I've lost my connection seemingly, so I hope you can hear me. I think we try to be as diverse as we possibly can. I think if you have a local communication that we're not using, then by all means, please send me the email details or speak with him and give him my contact details. We have, just to reiterate the point I've said many times, we do have a designated media person within the fostering service, and she covers most things that I understand and quite a lot of things I don't understand about some of the online means of communication. But yeah, by all means, Rob, if come to me with that information, that'd be really helpful.
Right, thank you, David.
Yeah, thanks for that, Rob. I know from experience it's a quality magazine that comes out. But having said that, you would expect that in Stanford, wouldn't you? Right. Is there anyone else?
Of course.
Of course. Yes, I thought I'd get a comment for that. Is there any other members wanting to come in at all before we move on? No, it doesn't seem that we are. So, John, thank you very much for that report. And yes, again,
Julie's got a hand up, David.
Okay, Councillor Kelly.
Thank you, John. Thanks, Councillor Folkes, for pointing that out. On page 137, in the introduction, it says that 83 foster placements have been lost during the pandemic, which is obviously understandable in some cases. Where do those children go?
I think that's where it is quite misleading at times. It comes back to the whole sufficiency thing. It doesn't mean to say that children were moved out. I have to say to you, the stability and the commitment to the children in placement has been fantastic. What it means is those potential additional placements, should we need one, were no longer available. So someone may have had one child in, but actually be approved to take two children. And what they were saying is, I'll look after the one child I've already committed to, but I will not make myself available for second placement. So I'm sorry if that misled you. That's the context.
Yeah, and the other question, which again I don't know is within the remit of this committee, is I had a phone call yesterday. I think this person found me obviously on this committee, and I explained to him it was the first time I've been on the committee, and he spent a long time talking to me about fostering, and obviously he talked about local authority fostering, and he was full of praise about the process and how it was done. But he then mentioned about private agencies and the process of private agencies and how many people, I don't like saying this, but this is what he said. He said, a lot of people who are going through private agencies haven't got the interest of the child at heart. They're doing it for the money. So, I mean, I don't know what to do with this information because obviously it's not a local authority matter. I just wondered if you could give me some advice on how to deal with it.
Yeah, I think quality of care is always a difficult one. If you go through an independent agency, which we don't want our carers to do, and I have to say we fight hard to try and prevent that happening, then they would still go through the same assessment and approval process that our foster carers would go through. And that would lead to them being registered. So they wouldn't just be able to say, I want to be a carer, I'll come to you. They do go through quite a lot of scrutiny. But I think on a broader issue, you raise a very significant point in terms of our own fostering service. We know that the independent agencies are far more active within Lincolnshire. And we're very sort of aware that one of the main attractions of working for them is that they are able to pay more money. My view has always been that a lot of foster carers give of their time through altruistic reasons to commit to children from our county. I think that's what's kept our community quite vibrant. But you will always get some people who, like all of us, need an income and may be able to go to an independent sector provider to think that they will get an income. What my experience in the past is that money quickly dissipates as a motivator, because fostering is a 24-hour commitment. We talked about the complexities of children, and I don't think you can ever reward people suitably for managing some of the more complex of our children. And most foster carers do not come to me complaining about the financial side of things. So yeah, it has attracted some of our carers, but not in significant numbers, and I don't want to be complacent about that. We try to replicate as much as we can, and we've also brought in things like retention payments to try and acknowledge some of the financial aspects. But money alone will not make you a successful foster carer or make you want to be a foster carer, is my sort of long-term experience, really. So qualitatively, they go through the same assessment, Councillor Kelly. If you've got more particular issues about that one case you'd like to talk through, by all means, make contact
with you.
Yes, by all means, come to me directly. We can have a further chat on Friday about it.
Thank you for that assurance. I mean, I completely agree with you that money can't be the only motivator, and obviously that might mean that children don't stay in the same foster home for very long. But again, that's going to cause trouble for them because they're going to be moving more regularly than if they had a permanent foster home. So I would like to talk to you more about it, but I don't. It's been a long meeting, and obviously we've got another item. So thank you very much, and I will contact you.
Yes, please make contact with me.
Thank you, Councillor Kelly, for bringing that up. It does crop up from time to time. I will just add to that you would expect me to say this anyway, wouldn't you? But I believe that our foster carers in Lincolnshire are the best. And we have a couple of foster carers, parents who are in here today listening in, and they always attend. They always do their bit for Lincolnshire, looked after children and children in care. And I'm actually very, very proud of the work that our foster carers do. And I don't believe for 1 second that they do it for the money, because if they did it for the money, Councillor Kelly, they'd find something else. I can assure you of that. So if no other councillors wishing to speak, I can't see anyone with a hand raised, but I might have missed one. So right, so we'll move on then. So we've received the report from John, and we believe it to be an accurate overview of the fostering service, and we are aware of the extra challenges during the COVID-19. And once again, I'm repeating myself, John, but excellent work as usual. And again, as councillors, we're very proud of the work that you do, and also very proud of the foster parents that we have in the county. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
So we'll move on and sitting quietly for the last 3 hours, or almost 3 hours. So I'm now going to hand over to Nigel West for the next item on the agenda.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, this is the Corporate Parenting Panel's work programme, and it's all set out on pages 147 onwards in your pack. The 11th of March is scheduled to be the next meeting, and it's quite a light agenda, as you'll see, and that's usually around about this time of the council term because of the run up to an election. And as you said earlier, we're not 100% sure when that election will be, but we are working towards a May the 6th election at this point. So that's what we're doing. You mentioned earlier the deferment of an item. I think it's item on the mental health survey, which may be added to the 11th of March agenda. Is that what was planned? Yeah. Okay. So other than that, it's as set out in the report, Chairman. So if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Thank you, Nigel, for that. Yes, it's not confirmed that that item on the mental health will come through. Obviously, it depends on the work being done by Bristol University on that. I think, as usual, before the well before the 11th of March, we will carry out our normal pre-meet and see if there's any additions we want to bring forward. Because I know we're working towards May the 6th, but I firmly believe that the election will be delayed. But until that is officially announced, we'll work towards that date. So, okay, so can I ask that the work programme is approved, please, by councillors?
I believe Councillor Foulkes has asked to speak, Chairman.
Yeah, Councillor Foulkes. Yes, Rob?
Thanks, David. A couple of days ago on adult scrutiny, when we came to their work programme, we were in the same boat, as to when the election's going to be and the possibility of delays and whatnot. And Hugo suggested that it might be an idea for their committee that they have a kind of paper that sums up what they've done over the past in the last few years to reflect on progress that's been made and that kind of thing. So maybe we could possibly do that for ours.
Thank you, Rob. Yeah, that's something I'll be very happy to discuss with Janice out of the meeting. And, we'll see, because by the time we have the pre-meet, I think we'll know definitely whether the election is going to go ahead as scheduled or whether it's going to be delayed. But whatever, even if it's delayed, I think it's an excellent idea, Rob, that we can actually show the improvements that have been made, and also the challenges that still lie in front of us. So thank you very much.
Yeah, well, it was Hugo's idea. I'm just pinching it.
Well, some of the best ideas are pinched, so we'll go with that. Okay, so any other councillors want to come in? Doesn't appear that there are. I'm going to ask that the work...
It's snowing here now. It's completely snowing in Lincoln.
Yeah, can I say that I'm very happy to hear that, and yes, please keep it. Right. So I'm going to ask that the work programme is approved. Oh yes, I can see that. It looks beautiful actually, with the snow there in the garden. So moving back to the business, I'm going to ask that the work programme is approved, and if anyone dissents, please indicate. I can't see that, so I'm not going to go to a formal vote. So the work programme is agreed. Thank you very much. Before I close the meeting, I'm going to have to say a very, very big thank you to Ryan Goodyear, because at 9:45 this morning, I found out that my Teams app had been removed from my laptop. And speaking to Rachel, first of all, Rachel Wilson, one of Nigel's team, then a phone call from Ryan, and I did eventually get here. So thank you very much for that. I'd also like to thank the people who attended today's meeting who didn't actually speak. And I had mentioned Polly and Anne earlier, and I believe Councillor Higgs and Councillor Trollope-Ballou were in attendance. So thank you very much for them. I know it's a long meeting. You mentioned that, Councillor Kelly. It is always a long meeting, and it always will be, because there's always so much to speak about, and it's something that councillors were very, very passionate about, and long may that continue. So that concludes the business of the meeting, and I'd like to thank everyone and for your attendance today. And you can now leave the meeting by pressing the red telephone leave button in the top right-hand corner.